But here's the thing. When you act, then you get to learn and grow. And the learning and the growth, it's only going to happen in the action stage. So I think the bottom line is you've got to act and not too much analyzing.
Leaders have a bias toward action. And the reason why is because leaders understand that only action gets results.
Are you thinking too much and doing too little? So many leaders and entrepreneurs get started by planning and preparing and thinking and analyzing and then thinking again, and they don't spend enough time taking action. And in this episode, we're going to show you why action beats analysis every single time. My name is Evan Weiland. I'm here with my co-host, Matt Ware, and we are in this awesome space, Clock Tower, downtown Denver. Matt, are you a thinker or a doer?
I'd like to say I'm both, right? And I think everybody is, right? We're both thinkers and doers, and we have to be. If we're entrepreneurs, if we're leaders, you have to think and you have to do. I don't think it's a binary choice. I think the question really, though, is how much time and energy are you allocating to thinking versus doing?
Sure.
Not long ago, I heard somebody describe this cycle. They call it the growth cycle, where essentially what you do is you assess, and then you plan, and then you do, and then you review.
Say that
and then
again?
you enter the cycle again.
Okay.
Assess, plan, do, review. Assess, plan, do, review. And I think that's a good way to describe the process that we all go through of sort of the thinking and doing. I think what's misleading about that is that you might be tempted to think that because doing is only one out of the four phases, that you should only spend 25% of your time actually doing. And I think that what we know in our entrepreneurial journey is that if you only spend 25% of your time taking action, you're not going to have a business. You're not going to move anything forward in your life, your company, whatever it is. So I think for me, a better way to think about it would be, maybe like a bell curve. If I could just put that image, in your mind, flat and then the big curve and then flat on the other side, and maybe break that out in a different percentage of like 10, 80, 10. 10% of your time and energy going into assessing and planning and preparing and strategizing, 80% taking action on those things.
I like that. Yep.
And then 10% reviewing and assessing, how did it go and getting the feedback and all of that, and then entering the cycle again. And, regardless of what the mental image is that you use or what percentage breakdown that you would put on it, I think, from our perspective, right? If you're watching, listening, I think what we want to put out there is to say less thinking and more doing, less analyzing and more acting as a general rule for most, if not all, entrepreneurs and leaders.
So I think people listening or watching, they're going to ask the question, well, what is wrong with the plan and analyze stage?
Right. Don't you have to plan?
Yeah, don't you have to? And I think, like we just said, because action beats analysis every single time.
Yeah.
Not to say that planning and analysis isn't necessary. Like you just said, you have to. It's got to be done, right? But the learning and the growth is really just going to happen in the action stage.
Yeah.
Period.
Right. And I think maybe that's what's misleading is we think that we're going to grow by getting more information, by doing more research, by, whatever it might be. Read another book, listen to another podcast, go to a conference. We're not saying don't listen to podcasts, by the way. But we think that that's where the growth happens. And there's a certain amount of growth that happens there. But I think when it comes to moving our organizations forward, like you said, the growth really happens in the action more than the analysis.
Yeah, another way to say it would be you don't know what you don't know.
Right. I hate that, by the way.
Me too. Me too. But here's the thing. When you act, then you get to learn and grow. And the learning and the growth, it's only going to happen in the action stage, not the analysis stage. So I think the bottom line is that you've got to act and not do too much analyzing.
Yeah. And, word of caution is we're certainly not advocating that you just don't think about your business, right? In fact, we could do entire episodes on the value of thinking and how important it is, and that the way you think matters, and that you're blocking out time to think about your business and all of that. So I think, it's important, and we've said this in other episodes, right? It's not a problem to solve, it's attention to manage.
Right. Yep.
This is attention. Thinking and doing is attention. You've got to have both. I think for this particular episode, what we're really dialing in on is to say, in our own entrepreneurial experience and what we see with so many people that we coach and consult, is that they do get stuck in this over-analyzing place instead of just getting to the place where they're going to take action.
Yeah, and if you are watching, listening, and you feel like you're the person that overthinks and overanalyzes, it's really, really common. But Derek Sivers has this really cool TED Talk, and it's called Keep Your Goals to Yourself.
Okay.
Keep your goals to yourself, Matt.
I want to hear about this.
Yeah. So really he explains that by sharing your goal will actually make you less likely to achieve them.
Sharing your goals makes you less likely to achieve them. That's what you just said. Okay, so that's very counterintuitive and runs against the grain from like everything that we're taught in goal setting courses and all of that, which is that you should go public with your goals, right? You tell your partner, you tell your sort of inner circle, maybe your family, close friends, maybe you even post it on social media, sort of depending on the context. And the reason being that when you go public with your goal, it builds in this automatic kind of accountability, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
If your goal is to lose weight and everybody in your, in your company knows it, then when you're in the break room and you're eating donuts, they can call you out on it, right? So that's the mentality of why we're typically taught in conventional goal setting that we should actually go public and it'll help us. Right. You're saying that's not true.
Yeah. So I'm saying that Sivers said that's not true.
Okay, fair enough.
So
maybe he didn't need to stop eating donuts. I don't know.
So, right. So in his TED Talk, so Sivers explains it like this. When you tell someone about the goal that you want to achieve, it actually releases dopamine in your brain and it makes you feel like you've achieved something.
Okay.
Kind of that's the effect that dopamine has, right?
Right.
It's a good feeling.
I got this high from just talking about my goal.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the problem because it gives you this premature reward like you've achieved something, and that actually is counterintuitive to achieving the goal. Now, I will say this, right? So I think that it's case by case. You have people that are overanalyzers, and that's what they enjoy doing, and so that's where they're going to spend all the time. Then you have people who are action takers. So if you're the type of person who is, inclined to talk about the thing rather than doing the thing, I think this is pretty solid advice from this TED Talk. I think that it's important that we make sure that maybe before we share it with anyone, we have an action step in place and we have a date in which we're going to take that action. I think that's a pretty good safeguard.
Yeah, I think that makes sense when you explain it that way. So maybe it's case by case, not only for the person themselves, but even for the goal that we're talking about.
Oh, that's
right?
good too.
Just kind of depending on the context and the scenario. I think what we do know sort of universally and unequivocally is that leaders have a bias toward action. Right? Leaders would rather do it than talk about it. They would rather take action than have another meeting about it. They would rather review game footage when they were actually on the field than to just sit in front of the whiteboard and draw up more plays. Leaders have a bias toward action. And the reason why is because leaders understand that only action gets results. And yes, there's a value in the planning and the preparation like we've talked about, but at the end of the day, you don't actually move the ball down the field by drawing up plays.
That's good.
You only move the ball when you get on the field, you throw it, you run it, like whatever the case may be, but you've got to make the plays, right? You can't just be thinking about them and talking about them in the locker room. You got to get on the field and do them. And so leaders have a bias toward action. And I would say that depending on your personality type, depending on your wiring, nature, nurture, like whatever it might be, some people just have more of a tendency to plan and think and analyze. Right. And some people have more of a tendency to just take action. Yep. And there's pros and cons to both, right? What I've learned, because my natural proclivity might be to do a little bit more thinking, take a little bit more time to research and analyze. The upside is that when I make a decision, I've got a lot of confidence in that decision because I've done all of that work. What I'm learning, and the further I get in my leadership journey, is that I need to get more comfortable taking more action faster, with less data, with less time, with fewer safeguards in place. That's where I've got to go in my leadership. And so I remember years ago hearing Dr. John Maxwell talk about this. I refer to him all the time because he's just such an incredible...
The GOAT.
Yeah, he definitely is the GOAT. He talks about this, that actually early on in his leadership, you wouldn't think of him this way now, but he describes how early in his leadership, 30, 40 years ago, he tended to be that way. Not taking action as maybe fast as he should, maybe spending too much time thinking and analyzing. And he said that one of his mentors challenged him to put a practice in place that would help him sort of break out of that. And here's how he described it. He said that his mentor challenged him to, for 30 days, every morning, the first thing he would do in the morning before his feet hit the ground, as soon as his eyes popped open, was to say these words out loud: "Do it now," 50 times. before he even got up. So he would wake up, do it now, 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 50 times before he got out of bed.
Yeah.
And then do the same thing right before he went to sleep at night. Do it now, do it now, do it now, do it now.
It's intense.
And it sounds, it sounds kind of stupid, repetitive or whatever. But he said, reciting that 50 times in the morning and the evening every day for 30 days, he said the transformation that happened in his mindset was just unbelievable because he was teaching himself, he was training himself that I'm going to have a bias toward action. I'm going to be a person who just does it now. And I haven't actually gone through the exercise, specifically that way. But just that story, I think, has inspired me to become a person who moves toward action faster. Because at the end of the day, we know leaders have that bias toward action. We've got to be people who are willing to do it now.
Yeah. As you're describing it, I think that folks who are predispositioned toward overthinking and overanalyzing, I think they can easily fall victim to it.
Yeah.
And here's why. It's my opinion that I think that we're all gifted in different areas, and we all, we all have a disposition toward different things.
Sure.
And when you're exercising or doing the thing that you're gifted in, you really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you don't think that you should be considering something else. And so I have a fun framework. It's really simple. It's just 3 parts, right? And it's plan, execute, pivot. And what I've learned is that it's been really helpful for me to not spend so much time in the planning stage and to consider all 3. And so again, it's plan, execute, pivot. Even more so, what I've learned, exercising that or using that over the last 6 months, 12 months or so, what I've learned is that it's actually plan, execute, pivot, and then you sort of oscillate between this execute, pivot, execute, pivot. That's where the learning is. And then you do, and then you learn, and then you do. And so I find that to be really helpful. Hopefully that's helpful to other folks as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great framework to think through. What we know to be true in business and entrepreneurship and leadership is that success loves speed. It's a cliche.
Nice.
People have said it before, but I really think it's true. Success loves speed, not always because you get it right out of the gate, but because you're out of the gate and you're going through that process of executing and pivoting and getting better and growing. And this idea that, if I can just get out of the gate, then while other people are thinking about it and talking about it and planning and having meetings, I'm already out there doing it. And so success loves speed, not because I got it right the first time necessarily, but because I'm actually out there engaged and going through the process. So I'm going to throw out another John Maxwell story because, why not? We're talking to leaders and entrepreneurs and he's the best. So he talks about this one time where he was having dinner with an Olympic sprinter. And I don't remember who it was. Otherwise, I would quote the name. But if you know John Maxwell, mid to late 70s now, a little bit overweight. And he makes fun of his own physical status.
I've got the picture in my head.
You got the picture in your mind. So as the story goes, he leans over the dinner table to this Olympic, athlete, Olympic gold medal winning sprinter, and says, "I could beat you in a 100-meter sprint." And of course, the athletes, they're not exactly sure how to respond to that. Like, you don't want to insult John Maxwell, but it's kind of like a look at me, look at you, type of a thing. But he wasn't finished with his thought, right? And if you know Maxwell, like he kind of leans in, like, I could beat you in a sprint. He said, I could beat anybody if I have a big enough head start. And I think, man, what a powerful idea that is when we talk about leadership and business is you can beat anybody if you've got a big enough head start.
Yeah.
He said, to this sprinter, he's like, if it's a 100-meter race, but I get to start on the 80 meters in, he's like, I can beat you. Like, it's no problem. I just have to get started faster. I can beat anybody with a big enough head start. And so speed, when we say success loves speed, speed is not just how fast you go,
right?
It's how fast you get started.
I like that.
And if you can get started faster, you can get ahead of your competition. You can get ahead of yourself in a good way, right? Like you can get those iterations moving faster than if you're only thinking and planning and analyzing.
Yeah, I like that. If I think back on the plan, execute, pivot, that makes me rethink what the plan stage even looks like.
Yeah.
I should be thinking through the plan stage, knowing that I should try to take action on this plan as fast as I can.
Yeah. So maybe planning then is just about enough information.
It's enough information.
Enough information to take the next step. It's not planning and analyzing the whole thing from A to Z. It's just enough information to get moving on the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to have the entire book in your head before you start writing a book.
Right.
You need chapter 1, maybe introduction. I don't know. Right. Something like that. So think about whatever it is that you're doing. For those who are listening or watching, maybe you're creating your business plan, right, for the next business you want to start, or you're thinking through the marketing strategy or marketing campaign that you want to launch. That plan, execute, pivot. How much time is actually needed in the planning stage before you can take action on that?
Yeah.
Because really, Matt, imperfect action beats the perfect plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got to just get comfortable taking imperfect action.
Ooh, that's good.
Well, this episode is about taking action and not just thinking and analyzing. And so why don't we wrap up so that if you're watching or listening, you can go and take action, because just listening to a podcast, as much as we love you, is not actually going to change your life. You're going to have to go put these things into practice and take action. So let me just recap real quick with some of the things that we've talked about. We talked about the idea that we have to be people who take more action and do less analyzing, because you're really going to learn by doing more than you're going to learn by thinking, right? We've also talked about the idea that leaders have a bias toward action. Leaders would rather do something than just sit around and talk about it or strategize about it. Sometimes we would rather even take action and get clarity through the action than to have clarity before the action, right? That's the do it now kind of idea. And then finally, what we were just talking about is success loves speed. And you don't have to be the best, but if you get started faster, you can beat a lot of people. You can beat a lot of competition if you'll just get out of the blocks faster. You can beat just about anybody if you get a big enough head start. So, hey, if you're watching or listening today, we just want to say thanks for being part of the Shift podcast community. We appreciate you. We'd love it if you would share, like, subscribe, drop a comment, something like that, just to let us know that we're helping you out and to get the word out to other people. We've loved being with you today. We hope that you go and take action, even if it's imperfect action. Don't listen to any more podcasts. This is the only one you need today. Go take action, and we'll see you next time.